Imagine waking up to breaking news. The Kim dynasty has fallen. Overnight, one of the world's most secretive and tightly controlled nations has collapsed into chaos. Soldiers are abandoning their posts, terrified civilians are flooding the borders, and world powers are scrambling to react. For decades, the Korean peninsula has been divided by ideology, barbed wire, and fear, but now, the unthinkable has happened. As North Korea fractures from within, the question that shocks the world isn't just what comes next, but how the entire Korean peninsula is about to change forever. This is the moment when history bends, when a regime built on loyalty, fear, and propaganda crumbles, and the long-awaited, deeply complicated road toward Korean reunification truly begins. When the Kim dynasty finally collapses, the first reaction inside North Korea will be utter confusion and fragmentation. The dictatorship is built on absolute, centralized control, and without a supreme leader, the chains holding the system together will snap almost instantly. Military factions, no longer bound by loyalty to a single figurehead, will start competing for authority. Local commanders in remote provinces will begin to act independently. Entire regions may stop following orders from Pyongyang altogether. This sudden power vacuum unleashes chaos on an unimaginable scale. Border breaches become commonplace, mass civilian movement begins, and the rapid breakdown of state services like food distribution and electricity leaves millions in the dark. But the greatest global concern, the one that will have leaders in Washington, Seoul, and Beijing holding their breath, will be North Korea's nuclear arsenal. With no clear command hierarchy, these devastating weapons become terrifyingly vulnerable. Nuclear sites could be targeted for theft, sabotage, or seized by rogue actors hoping to sell warheads or fissile materials to the highest bidder. The United States, South Korea, and China would have no choice but to act immediately. Special forces would be deployed to secure launch facilities and storage sites. With each nation racing to prevent the weapons from falling into dangerous hands, this creates an incredibly tense, high-stakes standoff on the peninsula, where a single miscalculation or a stray bullet could spark a much wider, catastrophic conflict. While the world's militaries focus on the nukes, a humanitarian disaster of epic proportions unfolds. North Korea's fragile, centrally planned economy cannot withstand the shock of political collapse. The state-run food distribution system, already unreliable, would cease to exist. Food shortages would rapidly escalate into a full-blown famine. Hospitals, already lacking basic supplies, would run out of everything. And millions of civilians would become refugees in their own country overnight. South Korea and the United Nations would rush in with aid, but the sheer scale of the suffering would be overwhelming, resembling some of the worst famines in modern history. The logistical challenge of getting food, water, and medicine to 25 million people in a country with crumbling infrastructure would be monumental. Reunification, the dream of the Korean people for over 70 years, will only begin after the initial chaos starts to stabilize. The first step will not be a grand political union, but emergency governance. Peacekeeping forces, likely under a UN mandate, were deployed to establish safe zones and prevent factional fighting. A provisional law enforcement system would be set up to restore basic order, followed by a temporary joint administration, likely led by South Korea with international support, to manage the day-to-day running of the country. Once a semblance of security is established, the gargantuan task of reconstruction begins. This is more than just repairing a few buildings. It's about rebuilding an entire nation from the ground up. Decades of neglect mean that electricity grids, transportation systems, housing, schools, and medical centers are all in a state of decay. South Korea, with help from the international community, would pour hundreds of billions, perhaps trillions, of dollars into this effort. For North Koreans, this period will also be a profound cultural awakening. After a lifetime of total censorship and isolation, they will suddenly be exposed to the internet, modern media, and ideas from the outside world. It will be a disorienting, overwhelming, but ultimately liberating experience. For South Koreans, reunification will be a heavy financial and emotional burden. But it will also be seen as a moment of historic responsibility, chance to finally heal the wounds of division. Despite the immense economic challenges, a unified Korea will eventually become stronger than either side was alone. Imagine North Korea's vast, untapped natural resources and its large, disciplined workforce combining with South Korea's world-leading technology, capital, and global economic ties. This synergy would transform the peninsula into a rising regional superpower. A new economic and political heavyweight positioned between China and Japan. Over time, as a new generation grows up knowing only one Korea, the deep scars of division will begin to fade. They will be replaced by a new, shared national identity, one built not on conflict and suspicion, but on unity, stability, and the hope of a peaceful, prosperous future. The fall of the Kim dynasty would mark the end of one of the most rigid and brutal authoritarian systems in modern history. But it would also be the beginning of a long, painful, and transformative journey toward reunification. Chaos, uncertainty, and immense human suffering would define the early days. Yet, so would an incredible sense of hope for freedom, for stability, and for a future no longer shaped by fear. As North Koreans step into a world they were never allowed to see, and as South Koreans grapple with the enormous responsibility of rebuilding a broken nation, the Korean peninsula will enter a new chapter that will test its resilience, its spirit, and its unity. Reunification will demand time, sacrifice, and global cooperation. But the reward is profound. A peaceful, prosperous, and united Korea capable of reshaping the balance of power in Asia for generations to come. In the end, the collapse of the regime is not just the fall of a dynasty, it's the rebirth of a nation. Thanks for watching.